If you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know that the last little while my life has gone through quite a lot of changes, not the least of which was moving out of London and up here to North Yorkshire. One of the things that surprised me when people heard that I was moving up here was how many people said to me something like, "Aren't you worried now that you're moving that your photography is going to change?" Because I always thought that changing context was all about seeing new things and expanding your work on purpose. I think questions like this betray a very common fear that photographers have, that if their lives change too much, or if too much changes about their context, that they won't be able to produce good work anymore because they can't rely on the location that they know super well and dig into that bag of well-worn tricks. One of two things is true if you have that particular fear. The first is that you might be right, in which case I would say that it's important that you get out of that context and that you build a wider skill set for yourself to make sure that you're a properly broad and versatile photographer who can shoot no matter where you find yourself. Or that you're wrong and actually your skill set will travel well and you need to just get braver about changing your context and trying new things and getting out of your comfort zone to make sure that you're reframing any changes that come along in your life as opportunities to grow and broaden that skill set that you have. It's true that when I was back in London, I'd learned how to do a very particular sort of photography that worked in that context. And I regularly went walking around in the steel and concrete canyons of central London, photographing the hard lines and shadows and shapes cast by the tall buildings. It's so easy to go out every day and walk the same paths and notice the same patterns and take the same sorts of images. But if you're anything like me, repeating things like that over and over again, after a while, you start to get a bit sick of it and your creativity starts to feel stuck and stalled. The fact is that I'll be able to go out into any city, anywhere I am in the world and take those sorts of images. That tool is safely stored in my photographic toolbox. But I want more in that toolbox than just my favorite screwdriver. I want a whole bunch of tools that mean that I can take competent and compelling images no matter where I find myself in the world or what the conditions are. And that means going out and teaching yourself new photography styles, which I think starts with learning how to see new things. I mean, it's no surprise, this looks nothing like London. It's one of the big reasons I moved up to North Yorkshire because I'm not really a big city person at heart and I wanted the open space and the countryside. But that also means me teaching myself to see the photographic potential in a new place that's completely unfamiliar to me. So I've just been spending my time exploring, driving around, seeing what there is to see and taking my camera with me to make images, to work out what I see in this corner of the world and where the photographic potential is to make new work for myself. So the weather took a little turn outside because North Yorkshire in the middle of winter, so we'll finish up in here. Everything I've been saying so far requires a lot of patience, but if our goal is to just get positive and consistent attention on the work that we're doing, we're always going to be tempted to stick to that one trick that we know really works. But when changes happen in our lives, that just isn't possible. When change comes, we're leaving our comfort zones, which means in many ways we have to begin at the bottom and start from scratch. And that means we can't start producing great work straight away. My friend Ibarionex calls it embracing the suck, which just means anytime you start something new, you have to embrace the fact that you're not going to be good at it, that you're going to start producing bad work, because anytime you start something new, you have to get through a bunch of rubbish before you get to the good stuff. The fact is that anytime you start something new, you're going to begin by being out of your depth. I mean, what an arrogant fool I would be if I thought I could come up here to North Yorkshire and just from day one produce brilliant imagery with a new point of view on an area that local photographers have been shooting for decades and are working towards that. I'm not that arrogant. I know it will take me a long time to produce anything that's really worthwhile and has a lot of substance. And in the meantime, that's going to require patience for myself. But this is the only way I know of to put new tools in that toolbox, is to try things you're not good at, step outside of your comfort zone and explore new things, even though you're not going to be good at it for a while. And that means creating in unfamiliar spaces with unfamiliar subject matter. And of course, that's going to feel uncomfortable and you're going to have some fears around that. But that's all human and normal. And I think doing that is the only way we grow as artists. And this is also where it's important to tune out the noise of the crowd, because it can distract us. I mean, since I've moved up here to North Yorkshire, I've had a few people comment underneath my images going, "I much preferred your work when you lived in London. You've lost your mojo. You made a mistake by moving." But I really don't care, because this comes from people who don't care about me or my long-term journey and growth as a photographer. They just care about the fact that they have expectations about the image they want to see from me today, and that wasn't met. But I'm not going to get dragged down by reviews of my exploratory images by people that I'm probably never going to meet. Instead, I'm going to set my eyes on the distant horizon, reminding myself that this is all a journey and that I'm doing the brave thing. I'm moving, I'm changing context, I'm trying new things, I'm embracing the suck, and I'm going to work in the long term to become a better, more well-rounded, more skilled, more tooled up photographer. It's also important for me to remind myself that as I try something new in a different place, it's still about my perspective. You might have heard that phrase, "Wherever you go, there you are." And that phrase is often used to remind us that when we change context, if we're running away from something, but actually the problem originates in ourselves, that problem will follow us. But over the last few months, I've turned that phrase over in my head and looked at the positive side of it. Wherever I go, there I am. My eyes, my perspective, my view of the world. I take my perspective with me. And no matter what subject matter I have in front of me, my perspective will shape and lead me towards hopefully a perspective on that work or those images that's unique to me. Because at the end of the day, it isn't just about taking competent images of this admittedly beautiful corner of the countryside, because I can walk into any curio shop and see stacks of postcards on racks showing that people have taken competent images of this corner of the world. I can't really add to that. It's about trying to work out, what do I have to say about this part of the world? Where does my perspective shape the images that I take, and how can I offer something up that's new? And that will definitely take a lot of time. I'm still allowing myself to take those postcard shots because it's a nice way to explore a new area that I'm unfamiliar with. But I'm reminding myself, even in these early days, that it's not about replicating those sorts of images. It's about, in the long term, me taking my perspective, the things that I've learned on my photography journey, my particular skill set, my love of light and shadows, and the subject matter that I'm drawn to, and applying them to this new context, so that hopefully in the very long run, I will have something slightly new to say with my images of this area. If you've been around this channel for a while, you know I won't be able to resist the temptation to apply this to our lives as well, because I think what's true of photography when we change context is also true for our lives in general. And I know that there are so many people at the moment who are going through really big, tough changes, things that they didn't plan on, upheaval that they didn't expect. And what if we, in the same way, changed our perspective and looked for the opportunities in that change to make us better rounded, more resilient human beings? Let's be honest and admit that all change is scary on some level. I mean, when I moved up here, I left behind friends and a support structure to move to a place where I didn't really know anybody. And I also moved to a place where I knew my job was going to change a lot, but I wasn't sure how, so it made it impossible to plan for how things would have to shift around. And that, of course, made me feel a little insecure and unsafe. But I reminded myself that all those things that were true about my photography were also true about life in general. And moving up here and starting a new life meant that I would have to begin again, but that there would be new opportunities to grow as a human being, as I saw new things, as I was exposed to new people, as I learned new things about a different corner of the country, that I would have to embrace the suck at the beginning, because I couldn't just hit the ground running. I would have to start small and build things back up again, because how could it be any other way, starting over? And all that would require patience with myself. I had a moment recently, just after New Year, and I'd gone for a walk on the moors, and I remember that I was thinking back over the last year and all the changes that had happened, and the fact that it was the beginning of a brand new year, and things just seemed to come together in my head, and I suddenly felt really hopeful. I looked around and I realized that I had found the courage to make those changes, to try something new and to face new things. I had looked for the opportunities to grow, and there were little things that were springing up that looked hopeful for the future as well, and everything was starting to come together. When I look back at the beginning of that change, it looked scary, but from the hindsight and the beginning of something new all these months later, it was starting to look like things were opening up again. Just remember, all change is uncomfortable and scary. Those are very human emotions to have when things are turned upside down. But if you keep moving, if you keep persisting, if you keep taking one step after another, I promise you, you're going to find yourself at some point, like I did on that walk, months down the road, where you realize that you are actually making progress, that new things are starting to grow up, and the reward for your courage for facing that change well is going to be a more mature, better rounded, more adaptable, versatile and resilient human being. Just before I show you some of the early images I'm making in this corner of the world, I wanted to let you know that Collection 5 is now out and available on my website. As usual, it's a collection of images from last year, 45 color, 45 black and white images interspersed with quotes from the videos from the same year. And purchasing a copy of this really goes a long way to supporting the work that I do here on this channel. So you can head over to my website. I will leave a link down below.